So, yesterday we got some pretty sad news about Satoru Iwata, in that he had passed away. And instead of, and I wanted to do some kind of video, but it takes me a while to script certain things, especially if I need to talk about a game. So I figured instead of doing a review or making a video just about how incredibly sad this is, like I did a few years ago when Ed Gould died. Those videos aren't up anymore, by the way. I figured that I would do what a lot of people think Iwata would want us to do, and just talk about something awesome that he worked on. So I'm here to talk about why I love EarthBound. And first off, EarthBound probably would not have happened had it not been for Satoru Iwata. The game was a total mess before Satoru Iwata came along. It was ready to be canceled, if I recall correctly, but Iwata came along, helped get everything back on track, and then after development time, EarthBound had the legacy that it does. And EarthBound, I feel, is a bit of a different game. It's more than really a good game, I think, because you listen to a lot of people's personal experiences with EarthBound, especially if you go on like the Starmen.net forums. People have gone into college because of EarthBound. People have met their wives and their husbands because of EarthBound. This is a very different game, I think anyway, from a lot of what has come along in just all of games history. I'm sure more than a few people have met their best friends, or even, you know, their wives or their husbands, because they both enjoyed a game, or they both enjoyed a movie, or whatever. But I really don't ever hear that. With EarthBound, it seems to happen a lot. Though it does have some tragedy attached to it, because pretty recently, there was an eBay auction that went up for a really cheap EarthBound cartridge. I think it was only like $50 or something, with the box and I think the player's guide, where this guy's wife had posted it up, and she was selling it for really cheap to piss off her husband, she had just recently divorced, and for whatever reason she got the games in the divorce. But whatever, that's not what I'm here to talk about. EarthBound, like I said, I feel is a very different game from a lot of what exists. Very few games, and I might have mentioned this, in fact I'm pretty sure I did, in my top 10 video game endings, but very few games can manage to get me to tear up or feel actual emotion. And EarthBound is one of those. Not even just with the ending, throughout the entire game, the characters are funny, when they have really quirky dialogue. Like at the very beginning of the game, there's a cop who, when you talk to him, he says, "Clear out, get out of my way, clear out, get out of my way, clear out, get out of my way, clear out, of way out, get out of my way." And that is funny. And there's a lot of dialogue that's just really, really funny throughout the entire game. But there's also moments of, there's moments of sadness, there's all kinds of emotions all throughout the game. There's even a little bit of hopelessness before I talk about the spoilers, so be wary, skip ahead a few minutes in the video, I guess. At the end of the game, when you're fighting Gygas, when you get to that, I think it's the last phase, none of your attacks can hurt him. And all you have to do is let Paula pray. And you really feel that you're pretty powerless against Gygas, at least directly. And very few games, I feel, can handle that feeling of powerlessness correctly. Off the top of my head, there's really only EarthBound and Mega Man X with the vial stuff at the very beginning of the game. So yeah. EarthBound is a really, really emotional game, especially once you get to the ending and you're walking Paula home to the Polestar preschool, and Smiles and Tears is playing in the background. You can go back and you can talk to all the people that were in throughout the game. You can go back to Onnit. You can go to 3. You can go to I believe it's called Summers. Right now, my brain is a little weird, and I can't quite recall all the names of everything. But you can go back pretty much anywhere and talk to anybody you've met in your adventure, and they'll have slightly different dialogue, and that's really, really cool. Very few games do that as well. Off the top of my head, all I can think of games that change some dialogue after Endgame are EarthBound and Batman Arkham Knight. So I always love it when a game puts that little bit of detail where the characters in-game acknowledge your accomplishments. And as you go and if you do decide to go through all these areas and revisit everything, and you're listening to Smiles and Tears in the background, it's a lot like if you were visiting old places where you used to hang out as a kid, and you're having all these memories of stuff you used to do there, and it gets really emotional. And that's what EarthBound's ending is to me. It's walking around the game for 20-30 minutes or so, going back to all the major locations and remembering the adventures you had with these characters. Because even though it's a Super Nintendo game, I mean, it is an RPG, so story's pretty important, but even though it's a Super Nintendo game, the characters, I feel, are all very, very well developed. They all have their own personalities, and they all stand apart from one another. They don't feel like they're just carbon copies of the same thing. Like, I feel you can really get to know these characters just from the story and everything in there. And remembering all these characters that you've come to know and realizing that your adventure is coming to an end, it's happy and sad at the same time, because you can remember how awesome the adventure was, but now it's over. And yes, I know it's a video game, so you can go back and redo it, but in the moment, it's just this huge emotional thing, and that song just helps perfect it. And I've tweeted about this, I feel, I always said that you should not listen to Smiles and Tears if you have never played through EarthBound, because you get none of the emotion from the song, and then it's just a good music piece. But I feel what really makes Smiles and Tears is the emotion behind the song. Now, though, I feel like you can listen to Smiles and Tears and just remember the memories you had of any game Satoru Iwata's worked on. Pokemon, it was specifically Gold and Silver and Stadium, Kirby, Smash Brothers, anything. Hell, even EarthBound. I feel if you listen to Smiles and Tears now, you'll probably end up thinking of all the stuff from Iwata's games, and all the memories from those, all the good stuff. I'm stuttering because this is something I'm actually really like. This is probably the most off the top of my head video I've done. I've not prepared this in the slightest. This is all rambling. Usually I have like notes or something, but I don't. But yeah, Smiles and Tears really does fit with not only EarthBound, but with Iwata now. And EarthBound, a lot of aside from EarthBound's story, which I do feel is its greatest strength, the gameplay is also just outstanding. Like, at its core, it's an RPG. That's really what it is at the end of the day. But it has so many little tweaks to the formula that just make it so much more enjoyable. For example, the health system. In most RPGs, when you get hit with an attack, the damage is just deducted. That's it. And that makes it really easy to die in some of the more difficult RPGs like Final Fantasy V. But with EarthBound, when you get hit by an attack, your health rolls down. So you have some time before you get from 500 to 230 or whatever. And in that time, you can heal. And that's really, really cool. I really wish more RPGs would do something like that, because it still makes it challenging, but it makes it just that much more, I guess, different from the norm. Another thing that is very different from the norm, and not even Mother 3 did this from what I've played. You know how in every RPG ever you have to go back at one point or another and you have to grind, or you just have to backtrack and you're fighting weaker enemies you fought at the beginning of the game and they go down in one hit and the fight is just a total waste of time and you're not even getting that much experience for it? Yeah, EarthBound does away with that. If you've made it all the way to, right before you go fight Gygas, and you then go back to On It and fight, some coil snakes or some spiteful crows, not only are those enemies going to run away from you because they know you're going to wreck their shit, if you happen to run into them, there's not even a fight. They're just immediately dead because the game knows you're just going to wreck them in one turn anyway. And that's something that I think should be in every RPG, because having to refight enemies that are totally weak and that are just going to go down in one hit because of how powerful you are is a total waste of time, especially if you don't get shit for experience from it. And granted, in EarthBound's case, you still don't get all that much experience, but at least the battle is over and done with in about less than a second. And I think those little... is nuances the right word to use there? I'm going to use it anyway. If it's not, then correct me in the comments. But it's those little nuances, I feel, that really make EarthBound stand out from the regular RPG fare. And it's actually kind of unfortunate, but at the same time I'm kind of happy that it didn't get as big an exposure as it did in 1995 as it does now. I'm sad because it was not an incredibly successful game, and so Mother 3 was never brought out over here, though that's not a big loss if you ask me. But I'm kind of happy because I think there's a certain charm to EarthBound being as unpopular as it was in '95 for it to be probably one of the most popular games now. It is, when it comes to games, it is probably the most popular cult classic in existence. And I feel that there's a certain charm to it being a cult classic that really wouldn't be there if it had been an actual success and a mainstream classic. Maybe that's just the hipster in me talking, but I feel like it is a little bit better that it's not as popular as it probably could be. But it's getting there, because we finally got EarthBound Beginnings on the Wii U. Hopefully this means that Mother 3 will get localized for all the people that care. I mean, I certainly don't. But maybe, you know what, maybe in honor of Iwata, I will finally do a complete playthrough of Mother 3. I think I'll do that at some point. Probably pretty soon. And even though I talked about the music a while ago, I'm going to go back to the music, because that's another thing that is amazing about EarthBound. The composers of the soundtrack's names elude me right now, and my internet is, as I record this, kind of screwed, so I can't check. But I know one of the composers is the same guy that did the soundtrack for the original Metroid, and I believe Super Metroid. And there's another guy who I cannot recall right now, but EarthBound's music is different. It's a lot of sound effects, and it's a lot of different genres. There's jazz from the there's both jazz and, I guess, big band stuff from the Runaway 5 in all their shows throughout the game. In both in Tucson, I think they're in. Tucson, and they're in Threed too. No, they get you to Threed. Tucson and Forsyth, I think they play in. And their music, and there's the tracks they have dedicated to them are really good. There's happy music like the Sunrise On It theme, which I've used in a couple of my videos before. I've used EarthBound music in my videos a lot, actually. There's the shop theme, which, by the way, is hilariously called "Buy Something, Will Ya?" And I love that. There's Pokey Means Business, which starts out as like this 8-bit track, and then turns into this like full heavy metal thing on the Super Nintendo, mind you. It's not like orchestral, but it sounds like heavy metal, and it's awesome. And I could go on probably for hours about EarthBound's soundtrack, talking about all the different stuff. And one of my other favorite tracks, by the way, is Super Dry Dance that plays in the desert. That song has like an adventure feel. When I was in Idaho Falls I think it was about a year ago now, I was far enough away from, or I was close enough to the hotel I was in was close enough to town that I could just walk there. And usually when I was walking, I was listening to Super Dry Dance because the way it sounds and just the way that it is, I think it fits perfectly for a walk or an adventure. So, yeah, a lot of the tracks, I don't think there's a bad track in EarthBound, actually. Like, there's upbeat ones, there's energetic ones, there's sad ones like Smiles and Tears that I've mentioned before. There's also Because I Love You, which is very slow and sad and awesome. And everything just works. All the soundtrack and everything just mesh together, and it's good. And last thing I want to talk about, and honestly probably the thing I have the least to say about, are the visuals. The visuals are not impressive, really. Like, for a 1995 Super Nintendo game, they're kind of weak. But there's a certain, like, style, there's a certain charm to them that I think is really good. I still stand by that. I stand by that visuals aren't everything. I always have. Like, really good graphics are nice, but they're not required. And I feel like EarthBound had, like, if it had really awesome graphics for the time, it's not as charming. EarthBound's simplistic style really works for it. Had it looked like Final Fantasy VI, I think it probably wouldn't have looked as nice, because that just does not fit with the game. You've got this quirky, cartoony, silly game, and it's got a very quirky, cartoony, silly style, Twitter. And so I think that those really mesh well together. And a lot of people have criticized EarthBound for having, very, I guess, poor graphics for the time, and it kind of I have heard people call the music terrible because a lot of it is sound effects, but I think it's really good. A lot of people think it's really good. But EarthBound is a game. There are two games that I can find no real flaws in. Those are Super Metroid, which is my favorite game of all time, and EarthBound, which is probably my second favorite game of all time. Is definitely up there, and I definitely do want to do a list of my top 10 favorite games of all time at some point. But I'm working on another top 10 right now, among other stuff. But yeah, I feel like that's really all I have to say about EarthBound. If I had scripted it, I probably could have said more, but it would have taken me way longer to script it, and by the time I did it, making it in dedication of Satoru Iwata would not have really mattered anymore. I'd be a little late on it. So I figured I'd just do this quick video, this quick 18-minute video, and just do it unscripted, so I can get all my thoughts out there and not have to worry about it flowing correctly in a script. So yeah, that's about all I got to say about EarthBound. I love it, and it's probably my favorite of Satoru Iwata's games that he was like majorly involved in. I think in some way he's probably been involved with every Nintendo game for a while, but a lot of them he wasn't. A lot of the games he was majorly involved in happened while he worked at HAL Laboratories, and he started as like a regular programmer for HAL. Later became the president of HAL, and then the president of Nintendo. And that's a pretty awesome promotion, if you ask me. But yeah, without Satoru Iwata, EarthBound would not have happened, and EarthBound is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. So I say thank you, Iwata. Did an awesome job, man. That's it for now, and I will see you guys next time.
I miss you.